Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Brian Alzate. On this show, I interview a lot of recovering addicts, and I also do anyone who has like a survivor story. Today, I have someone that I've been wanting to interview since I read your book, and we have a mutual friend. Shout out to Christopher G. And I have Richard Bresler. So, Richard, you are a 6th degree black belt.
I am.
And your book, Worth Defending, incredible. It was really inspiring to me because I think that I think it was the book to push me to do jiu-jitsu, because like I had read Hickson's book right before, and then I read yours, and it made me understand like the longevity that like jiu-jitsu isn't something you just like get good at, that it's just like a long-term thing, because in your book, you really see how much you struggle with it in the beginning for a long time, or thinking that you're not getting better, and you've been doing it for like years.
That is true, but you also have to find the right teacher for you. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have the right teacher, and I've had quite a few people reach out to me wanting to quit just because of being pressured to roll more. Mm-hmm. And I was never, ever pressured to roll more.
Yeah, and I think that after I had read your book and I had read Hickson's book, that when I walked into a jiu-jitsu studio for the first time, I kind of knew in my mind what jiu-jitsu was supposed to be. And I felt comfortable in knowing like how it originated and how like you had learned. I don't know, I felt confident in knowing that, hey, look, it's supposed to be this way, because I think Elio had said that he believes that people should do like 40 privates before they ever roll, because back then I think that it wasn't just like, hey, go spar. And I think now a lot of gyms probably do, right?
I don't know if it was Elio that said that, but I know that the way that their side of the family was set up, they mm-hmm. wanted to do private classes just to get you set mm-hmm. for what's to come.
And learn the basics, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember after 40 half-hour privates, mm-hmm. I got my blue belt, and I was just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, because I didn't understand. I just went, why am I getting a promotion? And what Rorion said is, he said, you're 3 times more effective than you were when you walked in. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, I can see that. Blue belt really started my journey mm-hmm. because when I started always supervised. I was still doing private classes, but there were other students who would come in. People would come in from Brazil, and we'd put in situational sparring. That's when I realized how much I sucked mm-hmm. because it was the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
But it was still always supervised, where the reason that I don't want people to spar in the beginning and other people shouldn't is because of it's not supervised enough. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, like this gym is, a decent size, but like there are some gyms that are huge that there's 40, 50 people sparring at the same time. There's no way to really.
And in big gyms like that, and that's one of the reasons why the boys over at Gracie University mm-hmm. have done such a great job, just because of that they have their combatives class and there's no sparring, and that I think at least 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I encourage people not to spar, and I'll tell them, I'll say, look, if you're going to spar, I said, you can spar with specific people if they want to. Mm-hmm. Because I have a guy that just started who's a wrestler, and the guy's a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to spar with some other beginner who's lightweight, because people tend to use what they have. Mm-hmm. And if you have speed and strength, you're going to use it. And you don't even realize, even if you're 50 pounds more, you don't realize how much power mm-hmm. and how much mass that you have over that person.
Yeah. Like I appreciated when I started that my coach would tell me like, hey, you can't spar yet. Like a part of me wanted to, but like I respected the fact that he was like, hey, you got to keep coming until you can spar, I kind of like the idea of like that it's not so egotistical, and I think that's what like really attracted me to jiu-jitsu is like the technicality of it, because like I work out, I go to the gym, like I know I have size and strength, but like to me what was so interesting is when like someone a quarter of my size would demolish me on the mat and like totally whoop my ass without using much strength, you know? And they weren't like that much faster than me or anything. They just had so many interesting techniques that I just didn't know what to do. You know, I remember like that drive home of like getting my ass kicked from like a girl who weighed like 140 pounds. And sometimes they wouldn't even be like purple belts or black belts or anything. It would be like a girl who had been training like 8 months. You know, you see like, wow, imagine if in 8 months I could like learn those techniques and have my size and strength. Jiu-jitsu is so, it's crazy how good you can get, because, you know, when I first started, I would roll with someone who was also a white belt, but they've been a white belt for maybe a year, and they're so much better than me.
Right.
And then I would just be like, just imagine what like a purple belt would be. And it would like, it was mind blowing that somebody could be that much better than you. And with little effort. That's the thing, is like, it didn't seem like it took them much effort. It was just that they had learned these techniques.
Right.
And use leverage and, you know, just like different moves that were just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite an amazing art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially if taught the right way by somebody who really is a good teacher.
Mm-hmm. Years ago, I was like interested in jiu-jitsu, and my friend was trying to get me to go, and he had stopped going because he said that he would just keep getting injured, and that the whole like culture of the gym that he was going to was just like spar, 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 don't be a pussy type of mentality he didn't like. Like, I'm grateful like the gym that I go to is like not like that at all, you know? Like, there's a lot of camaraderie, and there's a lot of like, hey, like, I'm going to teach you what to do. And like, I don't go in there like a meathead. Like, I want to learn. Like, I'm interested in learning the technique. I don't care if like you're able to like, I know you could tap me, bro, you know, and I know you're half my size, and I know like, you know, you've been doing this way longer than I have. Like, I know I suck, you know, and I'm just interested in learning.
Right.
I think reading your book set the tone for me to start jiu-jitsu without feeling like pressured, or that like someone was going to bully me, or that like I wasn't going to be good at it or something like that.
Right. And the book you're referring to is called Worth Defending, and it's available on Amazon.
Yes. Check it
that
out.
was the commercial right there.
There you go. Worth Defending on Amazon. Yeah, and you also have an audiobook too.
Yeah, audiobook and Kindle.
There you go.
There's no excuses.
No excuse. Yeah, check it out if you are
and
into
the thing
it.
is, for me, like we were talking earlier, it's something that is I've become very proud of. And the feedback that I'm getting it's amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it was like, it was short and like funny and interesting, and it's like a true story of like the Karate Kid. Like the Karate Kid is like someone from America who learns some foreign martial art and then like goes and competes in some tournament. And like with you, it's a real story about how a gringo, right, like a white guy, got into the birth of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in America. Can you talk about how you first got introduced into Jiu-Jitsu? And what was your life like before Jiu-Jitsu? Can you paint that picture?
My life before Jiu-Jitsu was, I was in the fast food business, a family business that I've been doing. I started this business when I was maybe just before my 10th birthday. You know, my dad came out from Chicago. They were in the ice cream business. Bresler's ice cream. Bresler's 33 flavors. I mean, they were pretty well known in the Midwest. My dad opened up a chain of fast food restaurants. They were called Henry's. And because his brother who died, his name was Henry, my dad opened up these restaurants. So he was the baby of the family, couldn't get along with his brothers, moved out west. I thought that this was going to be what I was going to do. But after a while, for me to stay involved in a business like this it wasn't feeding my soul. You know, yeah, I was making some money, but it was just the same thing over and over again. Yeah, hi, hamburger fries and a Coke, hamburger fries and a chocolate shake, you know, and then ordering stuff.
Yeah,
it was
it's like that they actually use that as like deterrent to people in high school. Like, oh, would you like fries with that? Like, that's what your future is going to be like.
Right. It was the kind of business that's a stepping stone business. Unless you get into management and you like doing that business, I really didn't care much for it. It wasn't, I knew I wanted to be in some kind of service. I couldn't make a connection with the people because how long did you have with them?
Yeah.
You
like
have them
2
for,
minutes.
2 minutes to get their food. Okay, thank you very much. Next. Thank you very much. Next. There's no real deep connection, and that it didn't sit well with me. Anyways, so
Were you like a timid, shy kid? Like, what was you like?
I was more on the shy, insecure side, and I wasn't fit. I was kind of pudgy, didn't really exercise, and then when I wanted to lose weight, I thought the problem was just if I lose weight, because all the other kids, back when in junior high school, the President's Council on Physical Fitness, I couldn't do more than a pull-up. I couldn't run. They'd run like 600 yards or something in a certain amount of time. I was coming last. So I went like, okay, I told mom and dad, I want to lose weight. And so they took me to the doctor, and the doctor gave me Dexedrine, which is speed.
Oh, wow.
That's what they gave you back then.
To lose weight.
Yeah, so I lost 25 pounds in a month. Hardly ate anything, wasn't hungry. I always had dry mouth. What I found out that I lost the weight, but I was now a skinny, out-of-shape kid. So I went into weightlifting, but I couldn't go into regular weightlifting because I was too weak. I had to go in what they called corrective. They had guys with polio and deformities.
Wow.
Not to put people like that down, but I couldn't get into a regular class. I didn't have any other kind of reason. It's just that I was weak. So to be in there, it really didn't do much for my self-esteem.
Yeah.
But I started doing like lifting weights and whatever in that class, and I got strong within 6 months. And I walked up to the pull-up bar where I could only do one, and instead of jumping up and cheating I just hung and did 10.
Wow.
And I vowed I would never be out of shape again. Not that, I can still do chin-ups to this day. I used to, I was kind of obsessed. I used to do 6 sets of 15 chins, run a couple miles a day, and then play some handball. And this was in my 20s. Anyways, but getting back to work, so I wasn't out of shape anymore, but wasn't happy. And then I started, started smoking a little bit of pot, and it was kind of fun. And then one day I was at work, and a guy who worked in a shop in Topanga Plaza said, "Hey, Richard, come on over on your break." I go, "What?" He goes, "Man, I got some cocaine."
Wow.
And I took a line of cocaine, and I was like, "Wow, man, this is great." And then I went back to work, and 15 minutes later, I called him. I go, "Dude, can I come back?" So I start doing that, and then a few months later, I found, I got a Quaalude, and I was like, wow, these things are just, because it totally made me uninhibited.
Yeah.
So my life became about, I would just do Quaaludes and do a little bit of cocaine and smoke pot, and, it was fun at first. It was like partying. But after a while, every time I got stressed out, I just want to do another Quaalude.
Yeah. Yeah, and the things that cause you stress start to get less and less and less.
And the things that cause you stress are becoming more
Because you're using.
you can't. That's right, because you're getting depressed from the side effect of the drugs. I wasn't very happy. I was operating. I left my dad's business and opened my own with him and a couple other partners in a mall in Hawthorne, which is not too far from here. It just made me miserable. It was culture shock being in the valley, going down there. It was just a different mentality of people.
And how many years did that go on for until you met Rorion?
We went down in 76. I met Rorion in the summer of 79.
Okay.
So it wasn't too long, but I went through, probably the worst time in my life, the worst drug binge from when I went to Hawthorne, and I lived in Hermosa Beach. Just so happens I lived a half a mile from where I would move to with Rorion.
Were you like partying, surfing, or
Wasn't partying, surfing. I was just partying.
just partying?
I lived like 2 blocks from the boardwalk in Hermosa Beach.
Wow.
And it was like summertime there was wild.
Yeah.
I was never an angry drunk, or not drunk, but drug person, but I was sloppy. Because they made me loving. One Quaalude, I'd go out and just like, I was so smooth.
Yeah.
I used to pick up a lot of people say, you want to get some women, give Richard a Quaalude and let him go to work. The problem is, one Quaalude was great, but 2 hours later, you'd have to do another one. And then a couple hours after that, so if you plan on partying for a while, and then I became kind of like, where before I could walk them and be smooth and tell them how attractive they are or whatever, I'd go, hi, my name is
Start drooling yourself. Yeah.
The Wolf of Wall Street, I don't know if you ever saw that. The Quaalude scene was I couldn't get the words out. I had the thoughts. And then, one woman came up to me after a party and she goes, Richard, the next day she said, you're really a nice guy. But she goes, when you take Quaaludes, you're an asshole. And I went, and that just cut. I mean, through
because
me.
It's like now why I'm doing the drugs is actually becoming more of the problem.
That was my life. I wasn't very happy. I was running a business I didn't like. I was doing drugs. I was getting more depressed.
And then you put an ad in the newspaper.
Well, I ended up buying, the guy that gave me the cocaine worked at a sleep shop in Topanga Plaza. I bought a waterbed from him. And then,
so you bought the waterbed during also, did you like buy Coke and a waterbed at the same time? Or was it just
no, I didn't buy the Coke from him. I got it there, but I bought the waterbed from the shop because, he was a friend that worked at the shop in the mall.
I want to support a friend. I get it.
So a few months later, he said, hey, we're having a sale. You can get the whole set, the mattress, the frame, all that stuff. And I went like, yeah. And I said, can you just deduct, I don't need another mattress. And he says, no, it comes as a set. So I had 2 mattresses. That's when I said, okay, I got to sell one. So I put it in the recycler. And Horion's roommate answered the ad, left a message. I got home from work. I called the number. Rorion answered the phone. And I said, yes, someone called me about a waterbed mattress. And he goes, well, that was my roommate, but he already bought one. And I was just about ready to hang up. But he said, I'm interested in it. And I said, okay, I lived in Marina Del Rey. So he said, okay, I'll be right over. So the guy shows up in a half an hour, which means he left the house right after we talked. Walks in the door, good-looking Brazilian guy, comes in, shakes my hand, very confident. We go upstairs. I show this to him. Says, okay, I'll take it. And I had 3 sets of waterbed sheets. And he said, how much do you want? And there were king size in the package. And he goes, and I said, $15 a set, which king size sheets, $15 a set, seemed like a pretty good price. And he goes, I'll give you $15 for all 3. And I'm like, bro, come on, man. And he goes, come on, from Brazil. I don't know how to speak English very well, And he said it really
broken. Yeah.
No, not broken. That's the thing.
He said it
he would always say that. I don't know how to speak English very well.
But he would say it in good English.
Yeah, and he says, I don't have a lot of money, whatever. And I'm like, and he said, by the way, you never know if you do this for me. You never know what might come back to you.
That's cool.
So I said, I liked the guy. He was very smooth. And I said, okay, fine. So we're walking down from the upstairs bedroom, and he said, my friend, have you ever done any martial arts? So I said, I boxed for a few months. No guy doesn't want to
say no.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like I don't know how to defend myself, but I literally boxed for maybe 6 months.
Okay.
And this was a few years before. And I said, why? And he said, well, my family's been doing jiu-jitsu in Brazil, and we're champions. And
did you even know what jiu-jitsu was?
I heard about what jiu-jitsu was in a magazine, in a comic book.
Or something?
No, I just thought it was some kind of martial art.
Okay.
It was some kind of like where you could take care of the bully.
Okay.
And my family's been doing this, whatever, we're champions. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, and you're one of these guys that's in this family of champions. But anyways, I didn't say anything. And he goes, why don't you come by for a free class? And I'll show you what it's about. And I went like, he said the optimum word, he said free private class. So I went, okay, and I showed up.
What compelled you to go?
His confidence. And he was just saying, I'm sure he said it was like the most effective art that there is.
Okay.
And it was a free class. And I had no idea what we were going to do. I didn't know we were going to go over there and go like, ha! Or,
you didn't know if it was karate.
I have no idea.
Whatever.
And when I walked into the garage, he had an area that was draped off. In other words, just like, a lot of times you hang up tools on a wall. Well, he had like a curtain coming down so you didn't see all the stuff. But the things that he had on his wall were
Medals?
a fake gun.
Oh, a fake gun.
a real knife, and a club.
Oh, wow.
And all I could do was just like stare at that, like if the knife's on. I'm just like, oh my God, the guy's gonna kill me. That was that paranoid part of me from the drugs. Anyways, so we come in, we start with like the two-handed grab, and he showed me an easy way to get out of it, and I went like, oh, this is cool. And then he did a wrist grab where he grabbed the collar, and as I grabbed his collar, he took my wrist and bent it a little bit, and then when he saw me wince, he kind of like held my wrist, like massaged a little bit, like and then he says, and then he would show me how to do that, and and I went like,
Was there a mat?
oh yeah, of course, he had mats in his garage.
Okay.
After a couple stand-up techniques, he says, why don't you lay down now? And he says, so you find yourself on the beach or in a park or something like this, and some guy mounts on top of you like this. How are you going to get out?
Which is how most fights end. Most fights end with someone on top of the other person hitting them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just like, and he mounted on top of me, and I could not escape. And I was just like, especially back, first of all, I'm 150 pounds. He is maybe 170.
You guys are the same age. What are you guys, about 28 years old?
27.
27? Wow,
Yeah.
You guys were young.
Yeah, thanks. We were young.
Well, you're still young. You were younger.
Yeah. Nice try. Basically convinced me I wasn't going to escape. And I said, yeah. He lays down. He says, you mount on top of me. He says, okay, hold me down. Don't let me escape. So I'm like holding him down, and
Got out of like nothing.
Just like
Yeah.
trapped and rolled. And I was just like, wow. And then I went like, I got to do this. This is it. It was so.
You got addicted from that point.
There was just his energy and the confidence and just the technique, came right afterwards when I'm ready to leave. And he had a freshly laundered gi when I got there. And then we were done. He says, hey, come on in. We go in the kitchen, and he makes me like some fresh watermelon juice. And we're not talking about putting it in a blender and spilling it out, putting it in a blender with a cloth bag, squeezing it out, and I was just like, wow, this was amazing. It's like, okay, when can I come back?
Hey, now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. What can someone get from trying therapy? Unload stress, emotional healing, help with anxiety and depression, and much more. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/exit today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/exit.
So I called him up and made another appointment, and at this point it was $10 a half an hour.
Wow. You think he does privates today?
If you're willing to pay him.
I wonder what he charges now for a private.
It's probably about $1,000 an hour. Yeah.
$1,000 an hour.
Yeah. I'm guessing.
Wow.
I would get a chance to, like, when he would get out of like a headlock, for instance, and then we're across the side, where the arm goes across the neck to put pressure on somebody, he would place my arm perfectly so it would like really cause maximum damage. I don't think he's going to do anything like that anymore with somebody. Yeah. Just because it's very hard. When we don't, and I know people that have had privates with him. I have friends, and he really insists on using technique and not muscle, because so many people tend to use the power that they have. And I always tell people, new people, I said, save your power. I said, look, if you're strong enough, you're fast, great. But your technique, once you get the technique down and then you put in your speed and your strength.
I run a lot. I would imagine I have pretty good cardio for most people. When I rolled with Chris, it was interesting because I was so out of breath and he wasn't even breaking a sweat. He's, done this for so long that he knows exactly how much, he doesn't waste any energy. And obviously, like someone who's new like me, that's all I do is I'm just wasting, all this energy. Like even when I roll with someone, like someone would be coaching me, like what are you doing, bro? It doesn't do anything. Like that's not gonna, like don't worry about that. That's not gonna help you at all. When you don't know, it's just you're just doing like what your like body's instincts are, and like jiu-jitsu is so counterintuitive. It's so counter to like what you think you would have to do.
Right.
When you first started with him, did you think that you were going to continue to do it at that time? Or were you kind of just like, let's just see where this goes?
All I know is that after one class was over, I was already thinking
About
when I
the
can
next
come
one.
back. Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, the whole thing is like, he made it sound like you do 40 classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I went like, okay, 40 classes. That's great. And then where do we go from there? We did 40 classes, got my blue belt, but, I didn't stop. I kept coming back.
Yeah.
And then there were, I would tell other people. I remember I told my younger brother, who really never got involved in jiu-jitsu. I told one of his best friends at the time. It was over at my mom's house in Encino. I went over there, and they're in my brother's bedroom. And I told his friend, I go, you know what? I can choke you out with this bath towel. And he goes, dude, come on. So I took the bath towel, and I just flung it around his neck and grabbed it and went for a collar choke. And he goes, whoa, where'd you learn this?
Yeah.
And I, told him about it, and all of a sudden he signed up, for classes, and he stayed with it until he got his purple belt, So, and then, other people would tell other people about it. It just, the way it was set up, especially to have private classes, and Rorion.
Was Horion's goal at the time to open a gym? Was he trying to, or was he just doing
spreading?
privates?
He was spreading the word of
He
jiu-jitsu.
was just trying to get as many privates and students as he could out of his garage.
Out of his garage until, until he got so busy where he, called his brother Hoyce. And Hoyce came over. I lived with Rorion in Hermosa Beach for a year.
Yeah, that's so interesting in the book where you end up living with Rorion, because like in the book, I like try to like think about how it would be like living with him, Was he like a super disciplined guy in all areas of his life? Like, what was it like? Because at the time you are probably like on drugs, because you kept using during jiu-jitsu for a while, right?
Oh yeah, I kept using for a while.
And he never asked you about it, right?
Well, he, like, I remember there was something that I do say in the book where when I was in therapy, because I knew I wanted to change. I didn't know how. I thought drugs were the problem, but, I'd realized that it opened up a whole can of worms for me to start looking at my life. Before I moved in with him, I told the therapist, I want to change. And then, but I was living with two guys in the music business, and life was about partying and drugs. So this is not what I wanted for myself. So I remember talking to Rorion, going, I really need to find a new roommate, and because I want my life to change.
Yeah.
And Rorion says, Richard, I'm looking for a roommate. And I was like, and he goes, let's get a place together. And I was literally floored, because here's this guy that that you're saying is super disciplined. Diet, everything. What the hell's wrong with you that you want to live with me? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Talk about self-esteem. I didn't know at the time he couldn't get a place of his own because he didn't have credit. I found this place which is known as the Garage in Hermosa Beach. We move in. He even gives me, there was 2 bedrooms, one with one window, which was the side, and then the back bedroom, which had a window in the back and a window in the side. So good cross breeze.
He gave you the nicer room.
He gave me the nicer room, but I couldn't park my car in the garage because the garage, because the mats. And I had a really nice 76 BMW 2002 cherry, new paint, and he says, you got to park this outside. And I'm like, whoa, dude, it wasn't much of a thing because there it was. So here we're living there. I lived for a year, and my eating habits were terrible. After living with him, I stopped eating, I say in the book, I was a Twixaholic. A few months after living with him, I never touched a Twix candy bar again.
Wow.
And then my eating habits were, I started eating 3 meals a day. I would combine them. It just made a big difference. Still doing drugs, but slowly my goal was to become healthier.
And he never mentioned like, hey.
No, I remember, to answer your question, I was sitting in my room one day, and this was early on. I opened up my desk drawer, and there was a little mirror with cocaine on it, and I'm snorting a little bit. Rorion walks in, and he goes, "Looks like the best stuff." And I go, "You want some?" And he goes, "Maybe later." But he never, ever said, you really shouldn't do drugs.
Wow. Yeah, his whole demeanor and the way that he taught you is so interesting to me, because you would imagine that, because like you see what goes on in like the UFC and stuff like that, and like the Ultimate Fighter show, and like where it's really like trying to toughen people up with like a lot of like machismo, like don't be a pussy type of mentality and be a savage and all this stuff. And it didn't seem like he was like that at all.
You have to realize, too, is that he realizes, and I think what he was drawn to and what people that were attracted to him were more professionals. I was never going to be that kind of guy. I never cared about wanting to fight. I mean, like when I did like a couple little challenges, first of all, it scared the shit out of me. I never had that thing going, yeah, I want to do it again.
Yeah.
A good teacher realizes, and like I've told
you're like
many
a real
people,
student of jiu-jitsu. You want to keep learning.
In other words, I also told people, most people that get into jiu-jitsu are hobbyists. Very small percentage want to go and they want to compete at the high level. A lot of people want to compete lower, like I did. I competed at the lower levels. As I started to age, I realized my body couldn't handle it. I had to make a choice. Am I going to do this for fun and enjoyment, or am I going to have to do this and destroy my body?
Yeah.
So
it's kind of crazy to see, because you see Rickson and he looks like he has a lot of back problems now, right?
Well, he had quite some problems, and Pedro Sauer, who's a Rickson black belt, he's had a lot of shoulder stuff. Fabio is, who gave me my black belt, who's a Rickson black belt, has had his hip redone. I mean, they've had a lot of injuries.
And I just want to say, for people that are like interested in doing jiu-jitsu, that I think that, it's important to say that these are the people that are competing at a super high level, but jiu-jitsu is something that's so cool that you can do every single day and not get hurt, because it's like with kickboxing or something like that, like you're going to take a lot more trauma to the head and stuff like that with punching. Where in jiu-jitsu, like, yes, you can get hurt, but...
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, obviously you can get hurt, but like, like at the gym that I go to, like I don't ever feel like I'm going to get hurt, because people know that I'm new and they like take it easy on me, and I don't like want to roll with people that are like really aggressive. People can do it with much safer environment than I think like sparring with like kickboxing or boxing or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can do it, and as long as I've told students, I said, we have to have an attitude of cooperation. We're here to help each other. When we do go to roll, I said, relax. I mean, there's a guy that I have been teaching. He's a blue belt. He's been around for a few years on and off, and he's a big, strong guy. And, I watched what he was doing with a woman that was much smaller than him. Probably he's 210 pounds. She was probably 120 pounds. Got across the side and started putting his arm across her neck. And I went over and I took his arm and I just lifted it off. And he felt me fighting, like didn't know what I wanted. And I said, relax. And I took his arm and I put it on the other side of her, and then I rolled with her next and just went nice and easy. And I said, here's a chance for you to practice just pure technique. There's not a question. She's a white belt, you're a blue belt. There's no question that she was going to catch you.
Yeah.
So there's less of a threat. So, I've been working with him just because I said, a lot of moves. If you're not threatened, just relax. And if you start to get threatened in here, so what's the worst that'll happen? In this place, you'll get tapped. You'll start to realize, instead of using all the power you have not to get caught, you'll realize how you get caught, and then you'll be able to figure out the technique to get you out of it without power. Because like I've said, I don't have the power to get out. I said, all I have is the technique. And that's what we want to start focusing on. So you really, at this, where I'm at, I should say, I really want to help people just to, relax and learn the technique and feel less threatened over and over again. And like you were saying, it's counterintuitive. Because so many people, when you start to, like if you put your hand up for a second, did I tell you to push back? No.
Yeah, you just naturally do
it's
it.
a polarity that people have.
Yeah, I was rolling with somebody and he did something with my legs. And, I've only been doing jiu-jitsu for like 2 months. And I'm like, he like wrapped my leg and I'm trying to pull out of it as hard as I can. And I remember he told me, he's like, you're never going to be able to pull out of it. You actually have to go down. Go down? Like, it's just like you just don't think to do that. And he wasn't really using a lot of pressure. And it was blowing my mind. And I think one of the best rolls I ever had is that I rolled with this girl. And this girl was probably 110 pounds. And she was like a 2-stripe white belt. So obviously she's been doing it a little longer than me. But she's so small. And a part of me was like, okay, Brian, like, don't hurt her. Like, I felt weird. Because, I'm a guy. I've never been aggressive with a girl in any type of scenario. Like, I've never, like, it's
Right.
so, even rolling with a girl is like counterintuitive in your brain. That's like a man, you're like, don't hit girls, And like, I remember, I think I was in like 50-50 with her and like I was supposed to get out of it. And I was like trying to do it without force and I couldn't get out of it. And then I'm like, okay, you need to get out of this, Brian. You can do this. And then I tried to do it like with force and I still couldn't get out of it. She was just had more technique than me.
Right.
And that's when I think I was like, wow. It's so interesting how technique can really overcome strength and power.
Right. You were saying about what my life was like, then after being around Rorion, as I started changing, I started focusing on what it is that I wanted.
Yeah.
And the more that I focus, I want health and I want this. There was no room in my drugs or for my life for drugs anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing in your book. And like, if you read like Atomic Habits and even like 12 Steps, like talks about this, that, if you try not to do drugs, you're focusing on the drugs.
Right.
So let's focus on things that are healthy. And then the drugs take care of themselves because you're so focused on doing the things that are healthy. And I think that in recovery, because like I'm a recovering addict, I was on drugs my whole life, or like as my whole childhood, basically. And I think that going to meetings and stuff like that was what I needed because instead of just not doing drugs, don't do drugs, don't answer the phone for drug dealers, don't call drug dealers, don't hang out with drug addicts. It's like, what else do you do? I didn't have any hobbies. There's no one I could even talk to about this stuff. And I think like I found like a community of like other recovering addicts and I was able to focus on things that were healthy. And I think in your book, you really identify that. And the way you wrote it was really beautiful to see how you went from focusing on eating good things, not focusing on don't eat pizza.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest things, because it's very easy to say focus on this, but what happens to you when you know that you want something? Because I wanted to get healthier. I saw this brilliant therapist, Dr. Dossi, who's passed a few years ago. And my focus was on what I wanted to do. So, and I wanted to be healthier. So when I found myself getting stoned after I had focused on this, it was like, what did I do with those thoughts? I credit what happened to me next. Hickson's ex-wife, Kim Gracie, who was the mother of Crone and Hoxton and the 2 girls, we used to do this work called rebirthing. And I'd do this breathing technique. And she had told me, she goes, Richard, you need to, focus on forgiveness in your life. And I'd stopped doing drugs. So I did these breathing techniques with her, guided breathing, and where I would be like in a meditative state afterwards. It was amazing. She said, when Jesus was asked about forgiveness, he said, forgive 70 times 7. Now, I'm not a big religious person, but it made sense. So she said, take a person in your life and write, I, Richard, forgive. So I took my dad because what I perceived about what he did to me, which he did nothing except trying to make me a better person, but I perceived all those things. So I wrote, I, Richard, forgive my dad. I, Richard, forgive. 70 times a day, times a week. Wow. So at the end of a week, I had written down, I forgive.
Wow. So
I took 3 other people. So at the end of a month, I had written down, I, Richard, forgive. Like I chose another. I even chose my the guy who gave birth to me because they had to break my collarbone to get me out. I was a big baby.
The doctor.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, people are saying, the kind of births, what you could have, the trauma. I wasn't walking around. I never perceived that, but I said, okay, whatever. I'll forgive the doctor. When I did do something that wasn't on my goals list, I would start to go into that behavior like, oh, Richard, you fucking dummy. You can't believe you did this. What the hell's wrong with you? You know, a lot of times people would, oh, well, I had a drink. Oh, what the hell? You're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So I would start, all of a sudden it was like, you've probably seen like a cartoon where there's the angel and the devil, where he's going, you piece of, and they're going, no, it's okay, Richard, I forgive you. No, it's okay, Richard. And I'd start having this little war back and forth.
Yeah,
and all
I have
of a
it
sudden,
every time I eat bad.
so all of a sudden I would start forgiving myself just to say, okay, it's done. What's next? And then I'd feel good about that. And then I'd carry on. And all of a sudden that little voice would crumble and going, oh, Richard, what a dumbass. And so I'd always have to keep going back. And that was probably one of the biggest things, just to forgive myself and give myself affirmations that I loved who I was. I didn't have a girlfriend early on because I didn't really feel good about who I was. I didn't start, and I think I don't know if I said this in the book, I didn't start liking who I was until I got into my 40s.
Wow.
Where I was like going, wow, I really like this guy. Because I was doing drugs. How could, matter of fact, when women liked me, I used to think, what the hell's wrong with them?
Yeah.
Because I didn't like myself.
Yeah, the self-esteem's so low.
Yeah, so jiu-jitsu, Rorion, and the path that guided me to help me to stop doing drugs and that destructive lifestyle and have a super clean diet now.
Do you remember the last time you did a drug? Like, was it like a definite...
Dude, last night. No.
But was it like a definite, like, okay, this is it? Or was it just like you just stopped? Because some people do. Like, I stopped smoking cigarettes. I don't even really remember like the last cigarette because I had stopped so many different times. Like, it like meant nothing. But some people have like this like moment of like, okay, I'm done after this.
No.
It was more of like a natural thing.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I stopped smoking cigarettes, it was actually August 31st, 1971.
Wow.
How would I know? Because my nephew was born that day.
Wow.
And my sister's husband at the time said, I'm going to stop smoking. And I said, yeah, me too. And I stopped. And he smoked for quite a little bit longer. But as far as the last time I did drugs, it was just something that was a natural progression. You know, I smoked pot for a little longer after I stopped doing the Quaaludes and cocaine. For me, pot, I'll consume a little bit of THC in a tincture form, but I don't do it to get high. I do it because I've read a lot about the therapeutic.
Yeah.
I accidentally did too much because I didn't know enough about it. And the high made me super uncomfortable. You know, people want to do that. That's fine because there's a lot of people who,
function and all sorts of stuff.
Function. Yeah. But as far as, I don't know. It's just that I got to a point where it just wasn't who I saw myself at. I just were like...
Yeah, and they talk about that in, there's this book, Atomic Habits, that for me, it like makes a lot of sense, like anyone who wants to break a habit or create new ones. But really, they talk about like you have to change your identity to change a habit.
Welcome to the Genesis House powered by the United Recovery Project. Located in sunny South Florida, we offer drug and alcohol addiction treatment, as well as a major focus on dual diagnosis. Our addiction therapy programs include behavioral therapy, 12-step facilitation, psychotherapy, life skills training, and more. At our facility, you can expect a low client-to-staff ratio, daily group therapy, weekly one-on-one therapy sessions, and luxury amenities such as volleyball, basketball, pool, chiropractor, personal trainer, yoga, massage therapy, and more. Contact the United Recovery Project today and let's create a better tomorrow.
So instead of like not eating something, like stop eating pizza, you want to identify as someone who's healthy, who eats healthy, you know? And I think that for me, like being in recovery, like helped change my identity because, you know, drugs were my identity for a long time. I didn't know even who I was without drugs. I was the guy to call for drugs. I was the guy to go to for drugs. Like, it was just
me
so
too.
fun. Hey, we're the same guy. So it's like...
They used to call me the Candy Man.
Oh, really?
My sister's name is Candy, who hated to hear that.
Oh, wow. They just called me drug addict piece of shit. Yeah, it's like, you know, you have to change your identity if you really want to change, like, the habits that you have, you know?
Well, Dr. Adasi used to say, you know, because I'd say, well, because I went to him specifically for a thing about how to smoke pot, how to stop smoking pot. And he said, you have to do something, you have to replace it with something. He said, you have to do something that's as good as or better than doing what you're doing now. So I said, what's better than smoking some pot? He said, how about like when you go to smoke pot, he said, how about taking a deep breath of fresh air? And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I set my mind to focus on something different, something that's as good as or better than. And when you first start, you really can't think what's better than that. You focus, if this is what you want, if you want health, if you want this there's no place for drugs in a healthy body. It's just like junk food. There's no place for junk food in a healthy body. We're always concerned when we give our animals, oh no, don't give them this, not good for them. People think nothing about going to a fast food place. You have to focus on what it is that you want.
Can you tell me, because I'm kind of confused on how it all started, how I know that jiu-jitsu started where the Gracie family was doing some form of jiu-jitsu, and then one of them was like sick or very weak.
You're talking about in Brazil.
In Brazil.
Okay. The story goes, it's almost like folklore. This is what's been passed down. Elio used to watch him teach, and then one day Carlos didn't show up for the class, and Elio taught him.
But was Elio the one who was
he was the
weak?
Small...
He was like weak, and he had to change the moves and adapt, and was that Elio?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
So now they're saying that Elio is the reason, in other words, why they do what they do. And I got to share the mat with him a few times.
Yeah, you talk about that in your book where he's like, why don't you go up against my dad? And
well, yeah, the first week that we share the house in Hermosa Beach, Hickson, Elio, and Carlos spent a week with us.
Wow.
Carlos Gracie Jr.
Wow.
And there's a video of me doing jiu-jitsu with Hickson, and Carlos Gracie Jr. shot it was my sister's Super 8, recorded, like a 2-minute video. So when I went downstairs, my dad wants to give you a class. And I went like, wow. And I went down there and I saw, Grandmaster Elio, who at the time is younger than I am now. But he looked, thinning hair, white hair, kind of a small guy, and here he's in his mid-60s. And I'm like, 28 years old. And I go up to Rorion and go, I don't want to hurt him.
Yeah.
And he pats me on the shoulder. He said, he'll be okay. And then we got on the mat, and he lays down, puts his hands in his belt, says, attack me.
So hang on. So are you guys both wearing gis? This is gis, right?
Oh, yeah. This is gis.
So you guys he put both of his hands in his belt and said, come on.
Yeah, attack me. So I started to go for a collar choke, and he would just turn and shrug his shoulder. And next thing I know, he ends up elbow escaping, gets me in his guard. I think could have been a butterfly guard, and he swept me.
Wow.
And then I don't know how he tapped me, but it was just like, I'm going like, and I just felt completely helpless.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that is like the experience that I have with jiu-jitsu, because like I suck really bad. Like I'm not good, and it's like people are so.
Me too.
You too. Well, it's like that feeling of being like defenseless, and it's like me being like a bigger guy, like you just don't think that could happen to you from someone who's one like a lot smaller than you, or like even like a girl. Like there's like this one girl at like my gym that's like demolishes me every time, and so easily. I remember this one time she did like the lapel choke where you like pull out your gi, and like I didn't even know that was legal. A part of me was like, are you even allowed to do this? And like she like takes out her lapel and she like wraps it around my neck and like chokes me out with it. And I was just like, it feels good to be like so novice at something, to be like have so much to learn.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I still love teaching. I mean, my focus is basically just to be a coach for people. I mean, I just want to, share my enthusiasm and show as much little details as possible to make things as easy as possible, especially for the smaller person. I mean, one of my students who's been with me for quite a few years now, and he's a 4-stripe blue belt. only trains at a Krav Maga school, started with me. His girlfriend used to always come and say hi, and all of a sudden, but, we'd always say, hey, why don't you come in and take a class? She goes, yeah, one of these days I'll show up, and I was saying this to her for 3-4 years. Well, after we got here, all of a sudden she just shows up. She goes, here, I'm here for my class. I'm like, what? So she's 90 pounds.
Wow.
And so she comes in and she takes a class. And I said, okay, there you go. You basically said what you were going to do. Thank you very much. I'll never see you again, basically, except socially. And all of a sudden, something happened to her. She shows up the next day and the next week. And then she buys a gi. And now she's coming back for classes. But she's also pretty fragile. She reminds me of me. I would get hurt easier. Remember, I was 140, 150 pounds. And most of the guys that I would roll with were
200 something.
Well, they were at least 170 to 200 pounds, and they were younger than me. A lot of the guys would come in were like 10 years younger.
Yeah.
My body used to get trashed a lot. And after a few years of sparring with some of these guys, I was very selective who I rolled with. But for her, to come in now, I'm very protective. Those are the people that, there's quite a few women that train in here I'm very protective of because I want to make sure that they learn the right techniques.
Yeah, because think about it, if it's intimidating for me, imagine what it's like for them.
Yes.
And that's also inspiring because sometimes I'm like, man, I suck so bad. And there's so much that I need to learn. And I just get my ass kicked by so many people. And imagine what it would be like to be and some of these, some of the women there, they're purple belts, and they've been doing this for years. And they're good now. But imagine what it was like when they first started. So a lot of that inspires me to be okay, you can do this. Because sometimes it just feels like, you're not getting better. Obviously, I've only been doing it for a couple months. But sometimes I'm damn it, when am I going to get good? Never, 10 years from now. It's interesting to see people that stick with it, that how good they can get. Especially being a lot smaller, So the legend goes that Elio had to adapt all the tricks or all the moves because he didn't have the strength, right?
Well, he didn't have the strength or the stamina, so he basically made the techniques much simpler. And one of the things in my class, one of the things that I'm showing people is I say, look, if you can't do it the way that I'm doing it, it can't be done because. As far as just the technique alone. If there's something simpler, I want to see it. And that's one of the things where when I was over at the Krav Maga gym, their self-defense was a lot of striking. And I used to say, look, guys, a smaller person, let's say a woman who's 100 pounds, 120 pounds, fighting against a bigger guy who grabs them, and the guy's 200 pounds, her strike
is not going to do anything.
Yeah, not going to do it unless it's perfectly placed. And to have a perfectly placed strike with power, you have to train for years.
Yeah, and it's also in the heat of the moment, you don't know if you're going to get it off.
I just said, you have to give the odds to doing this, because they used to say how hard it was to learn to get good. And I said, no, if you train on a regular basis, it's not going to be like that at all. It's just that theirs was theory-based. They'd say, well, when they do this, I'll do this. And they would hit a bag.
Yeah.
I said, look, hitting a bag is nice.
Life, yeah.
But being able to choke somebody out and being able to get him in an arm lock and being able to break a grip, I said, you are basically seeing the effectiveness right before your eyes. It's not theory-based. It's proven. Jiu-Jitsu at so many levels is so good. And you were saying, you can keep staying on the mat. And one of the reasons why a lot of people quit is because of the kind of competition gyms that they're in. If that's where they go and they have to deal with it, it's kind of like high school wrestling. High school wrestlers, they might wrestle in college. They don't continue to wrestle because it's so hard on the body. Just like this, there's a lot of guys that will continue to do this, but at what price?
Yeah, I got my friend into jiu-jitsu and he used to wrestle in high school. And he was in high school, when a new guy would come in, they would try to break them and try to hurt them as much as possible, almost to get them to quit. And he was like, I thought jiu-jitsu might be the same. And I would imagine some gyms maybe are, but it's not supposed to be that way. Like the way jiu-jitsu is set up is that it's supposed to be set up so that like a weaker person can learn to overtake someone who's a lot stronger than them.
What do people call jiu-jitsu today? They call it a sport. Irks me.
Combat sports, yeah.
Yeah, well, because jiu-jitsu is a martial art. It is a self-defense. It has a sportive aspect, but it really irks me when people say, oh, I love jiu-jitsu, it's a great sport. Don't limit it as being that, because, when Rorion first taught me, he says when they go to a place, they're looking predominantly to be able to defend themselves.
In a real life scenario.
So it's a self-defense, it's a martial art that has a great sportive aspect to it. My concern is that we're losing it because people think it's just a sportive aspect. These people get slammed, and if you get in someone's guard, and let's say if you're in my guard, I'm not ever taught to uncross my legs if you stand up and grab me and go to slam me in the street. If that ever happens, it's over. So, when we used to have our tournaments back before the academy, slamming was allowed. So if some guy lifts you up, man, you uncross your legs because it didn't take much for you to get popped.
Yeah.
Where now, I remember when I saw tournaments and the guy would be in the guard and he'd just climb up on him and with no regard looking back. And some newbies would slam the guy and they'd be disqualified. Just the mentality of like that. Look, some people that are very sportive in jiu-jitsu, I'm not saying not to have the sportive aspect. I'm just saying train different scenarios.
Yeah.
Unless you're really, because Jeff Glover and Henner Gracie just had a debate, sport or street. Jeff Glover is an elite grappler. He's not going to have a problem getting into a fight. We're not talking about at that level. We're talking about the average guy that comes in. Train, have fun, do the sportive stuff, but always keep in the back of your mind the things that could happen. Train that other aspect too, just so you're kind of used to, because I've been lifted up by some big guys.
Yeah.
And if I didn't let go, man,
Can you talk about the scenario that happened with your dad? Because for me, that was one of the part of the book that I resonated with the most.
What scenario was this?
The ping pong scenario. One, I went through the exact same scenario with my father, where, we would just always go back and forth with him pissing me off and me pissing him off. And I have a friend who, same scenario. And I sent him that part of your book. I was like, you got to read this part of the book, because you really break it down to how to not just diffuse a scenario with family members, but almost any scenario in your life.
Well, first of all, it's easier said than done, because the more you are involved with somebody, the more you have developed habits with them. So the story that you're referring to is, here I was in the business. We closed up Hawthorne. I went to help my dad out in Topanga Plaza, where he still had his place. I'm in my 20s, even maybe late 20s, maybe even early 30s, helping him out, working the grill. Now, working the grill in a fast food place at 30 years old that I've been at for a long time, you figure it's not rocket science, but you're probably thinking this guy knows how to flip a hamburger. So, but what my dad would do, because of his controlling nature, I would come over and we'd be busy on a Saturday. My dad would actually come over, bend down, look where the flame was on the grill, and he'd say, Richard, move the burgers over. And he'd literally say, move them over like a half an inch. And I'd say, Dad, go bother someone else. I know how to work the grill, whatever. Don't talk to me like that. I'm your father, and I know what the hell I'm doing here. So I'm like going, and I'd go back and forth. So I remember telling Dr. Dossie this. And he says, Richard, he says, sounds like you want your dad to change. And I said, yeah, I want to. He says, okay. He says, we can do that. And I went, really? He says, yeah. He says, so you really want your dad to change? And I said, yes. And he goes, are you sure? I'm like, okay, what? Dude, come on. He said, I can get your dad to change. And I said, okay, great. How? And he says, next time your dad comes over and he tells you to move the hamburger over, say exactly how far. And he says, that'll diffuse him, because he's so used to you fighting, he's already set up for that. So the next time my dad comes over, my dad says, hey, move the burgers. It was like clockwork. So I go, Dad, exactly where would you like them? And he'd say, put them over here. So I moved the whole row over, just a half inch, all 18 patties on the grill. And my dad stood there and ready for this fight. And he stood there and he went, okay. And he walks away. And I went, oh my God, that was so easy. He explained to me, it's like if you're playing ping pong with somebody and you stop playing, or if you're dancing with somebody and you stop dancing, they're going to shake for a little bit. They're going to hit the ball a little bit. But after a while, they're going to move on someplace else because you stopped. You stopped engaging with them.
Yeah.
It was just like, wow. Like I said, you have to really stop and think, because I know that all family members that'll see this and they go, oh yeah, Richard, no, well, that's not what happened with you and me.
Yeah.
You know, it happens. It's just, it was so instrumental with him because it was my father that I really started. I was telling people at one time I hated him.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate my dad. I loved my dad. He did so much for me, but the way he was. So if you can take responsibility, because all he was saying was he wanted to be in control. So I said, okay, I let him have control. He walked away.
Yeah, and what someone explained to me is like, as a father, they feel like their job is to tell you what you need to do better.
That's right.
So I remember having issues with my dad, and if I got B's, he would tell me I need to get A's. And if I got A's, I needed to get A pluses. And if I, like whatever it was, he could never be like, hey, that was great. It would always be like, well, you should have done this. Well, you could have done that. I remember he heard me speak at some meeting, and on the way home, he said, when I got home, he gave me this card of things I need to work on. And he said that I said and like too many times. He said I cursed too many times. He said it got boring in the middle. And he said I should take some public speaking classes. And man, it makes me laugh, but like it almost made me cry.
Yeah.
Because it's like, here I am, like I spoke at this
No,
meeting.
I'm laughing because I just relate to what my dad was with me. It wasn't that it was funny.
So it's like he was always doing that. And I remember I called my sponsor, and my sponsor laughed, and he said, that's what dads do.
Yeah.
That's his job.
He wanted to make you better.
His job is to make you better. No matter what it is, he's never going to be able to be satisfied because he always thinks that you got more in you. And I never saw it that way. And like, someone had to tell me, like, he sees your potential that is so much more than what you're doing. And he just wants you to push you beyond that.
Right.
I just saw it as he doesn't love me. It's never good enough. All these things. And when I read your book, it like really hit home with me because I remember the day I stopped fighting with him. I remember the day where like he would say something, I'd be like, okay, and I don't have problems with my dad. Like sometimes my sister does, or she has in the past, and she'd be like, can you believe dad did this? I'm like, yeah, he did it her whole life. That's what he does.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to change him anymore. I love him just the way he is, and like, me and my dad are like best friends today.
Well, my dad changed though. He changed.
Yeah, my dad did eventually too, because he wasn't playing ping pong anymore.
You want to change somebody, change yourself. I mean, didn't Michael Jackson sing a song about that? The man in the mirror.
Yeah.
In other words, look at yourself. Because I used to sit there and, when I'd go and talk to Dr. Dossi, and I'd sit there and go, yeah, and I'd say certain things about certain people. And he'd say, Richard, he says, you really like to point your finger. And he gave me the analogy, and he says, point your finger at me. And he goes, how many are pointed back? And I was like, wow, really take responsibility for yourself. He said the meaning of the communication in most cases is the response you get, not your intent. You can have great intentions and get a shitty response. Yeah. So what's the real meaning of your communication? So I always sit there and go like, wow. I always think about, wow, I might not be able to do it at the time, but I'm always reflecting. And I've told students, I said, look, you'll see me get excited in class. That's not about you. It's about my own inability to give you what it is that I really want to give you. My lack of being able to
transfer it.
That's right, transfer it. I said, that's my issue, not yours.
Yeah. Because
the truth of the matter, that is the truth.
Yeah, if you're not getting it, it's my fault.
That's right. I want to take responsibility. So when Rorion first told me that, like, because there's a story in the book where I'm crying when I couldn't do the move, and Rorion said there's no such thing as a bad student. And in a private class, it's much, much easier because I'm there to give you feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that where people read your book and they're like, well, you're not like that with me. And you're like, well, dude, this was a private class, not a class with multiple students in there where I have to deal with the whole class. you know? And it's like, yeah, doing those privates with him, you were able to get that individual attention.
Right. Now put your hand up one more time.
There you go.
It's still a little polarity, right?
Yeah.
But still, you kind of like, so, but if I were to do that with other people, they kind of like.
They push, yeah.
That's right. They push and no one asks them to. So it's kind of, but the more you're doing that with somebody, like giving immediate feedback, because people would always remark when I would be showing a move to somebody, like two people showing a move, and I had a guy that's been with me for a long time. It's a purple belt, and he always helps me, always working with the person who's not that good, you know, when they start out, you know, and he's the first one to jump in. He would try to get them to do a move, and he would call me, Richard, can you do that? I just can't get them. And I'd go over there and I'd show them the move, and they'd get it the first time. And he goes, how do you do that? I said, you know, having Rorion as a teacher over and over again, I don't know at what point it just became part of me, but I know how to position myself so it wastes less time. I know how to be that partner that you need, where the average person, they're trying to learn the art themselves. They don't know how to place themselves to make you do the move easier and then slowly make it harder on you. That is an art. Teaching is an art. Just because a person gets a black belt doesn't mean they're a teacher.
Yeah, because it's like there's people that Customato who trained Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson says like there's no record of this guy ever fighting. You know what I mean? So it's like Mike Tyson doesn't even know if Cuss ever even fought professionally, or if he has no record to fight him. But this guy was a hell of a teacher. Just because you're good at a sport or anything, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a good teacher, because teaching in itself is its own art. And I think that, you know, that's what like your niche is, because like when you read your book, like you see how like a lot of people could do like these tournaments and stuff, but like you really fell in love with teaching.
I felt, you know, I had Rorion as a private teacher for easily 10 years.
That's crazy.
And then I was one of 4 that went through the instructor program, the first instructor program at the Gracie Academy in 93. But I started teaching before them because I was with him. I kind of knew it, but then we formally to go through the instructor program. I remember Rorion would always come and ask us a question when we were together. And I was always the last one to answer because I wanted to see if the other guys knew. I knew what Rorion wanted. Yeah. So he'd ask questions and they'd kind of like, well, and then they'd look over at me and I'd have the answer. I knew what it was. I knew the mentality. Yeah. And I'd helped Steve Maxwell, who went through the instructor program after, who's a black belt under Helson, who's a 6th degree. He would always come out and work with me because I knew how to get him passed so he could pass the exam, because it was just, it became my thing. I loved teaching. I loved teaching privately. It's harder on my body. It's easier to bypass that other kind of stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, but teaching in itself, one, to have that kind of a teacher and then to fall in love with it is just, you know.
How many people have you seen like from white belt to black belt?
I have never promoted a person to black belt. I think the most I promoted is purple, because I was in a Krav Maga gym and a lot of people, what they would do is they would come there and I'd ignite their fire
and then they'd go to
a different school.
Gotcha.
And I gave many blue belts and gave a few purple belts.
What was Chris like when you first taught him? Did he pick it up really quick?
Chris, I mean, like what he told you, I called him the sponge.
Wow.
Because he was I
remember trying to figure out how to tie the belt.
I remember the sweep, the sit-up hip bump sweep.
The bottom part fall out. It's okay. Yeah. Don't worry about it here.
Anyways, the hip bump sweep. And all of a sudden, I remember I showed it to him, and he pulled it off during sparring the first time. I'm going like, geez, how the hell did he do that?
Wow.
You know, so Chris was very, he could absorb things, you know, and just a really conscientious student, you know, as well as a good guy.
Yeah.
I love Chris.
Me too.
You know, so.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. The book is called Worth Defending. It's on Amazon. And anything else you want to plug in or say?
A lot of people that have read like it right now, I happen to see it's got 249 or 248 5-star reviews.
Awesome.
So many people have reached out, especially at higher levels, just to say how they relate the same way you did. It's a great book. It's got an excellent story. And if you've read it already, I'm sure a lot of people have said also they gave a copy to their friends, bought a copy for their friends, or at least encouraged them. But anyways, thank you
thank you so much, Richard. It's a pleasure meeting you. Absolutely.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.